For this Iron Man guide, I'll fly past the abilities because I'm sure you know how they work already, and instead I'll be dropping some actual useful tips on how to play Iron Man effectively. I'll be covering ability combos for more efficient damage, aiming tips, positioning tips, better ultimate usage tips, and high-ranked gameplay analysis so you can understand exactly how to play Iron Man as best as possible. Let's first start with mastering aim with Iron Man. He's not the hardest character to master here, but there are some tips that most Iron Man players aren't aware of, and it's losing them out on a lot of kills. Let's start with his laser beam. The first tip is that anything in the laser's path as it travels from his chest will take damage. It's not only where your crosshair is aiming at, but wherever the laser beam aims towards. Knowing this will make it far easier to hit your shots and track targets to deal as much damage as possible. Not only that, but it allows you to learn how to shoot multiple players at once with the laser beam. Yeah, you can do that. As soon as I realized that, and also realized how it's far easier to aim here instead of right at the center of your screen, I started doing so much better with Iron Man. Now let's talk about the blasters. This is the blast radius. Anything in that radius will take damage. However, if you actually hit a player directly, it will do more damage. So whilst it's good to use blasters on clusters of enemies to rack up damage, charge your ult and keep the healers busy, if you want to go for kills, try to aim on target. Now that's kind of hard to do with a slow firing missile though, right? Well, the best way is to aim slightly ahead of the direction the player is moving and then fire at their center of mass. Get some practice with this in the range to see how at different distances, how much further ahead you'll need to aim on a moving target. Practicing this and spending some time in the range to understand how far ahead you need to aim will allow you to get far more kills with Iron Man. Also, on your main attack, every third hit will do a bit more damage. If you want a reminder of the blast radius size and also where to aim to line up as many players as possible with the unibeam, you can use my crosshair for Iron Man. This line perfectly lines up with the laser beam path. Anything in this path up to 22 meters will take damage, and considering his unibeam only goes up to 25 meters range, this is pretty good. The transparent outer circle also shows the blast radius. Now, a quick heads up, crosshairs are not going to make you play better, and you shouldn't be focusing on the crosshair itself, but this provides a little bit of extra subconscious information to make sure you know where and when to aim. So with all of these aiming tips at the ready, who should you be aiming at? To me, Iron Man's attacks are really good at sneaking damage into the backline at the healers. Because the laser beam basically goes through targets, you can really easily pick off the healers at the backline while shooting through tanks in the front line. The best way to play Iron Man is to constantly ask yourself, what cheeky angles can I use right now to get kills on the supports? Whether it's with the laser beam or the blasters, there is always an angle you can use to shoot into the backline in a way that other heroes just can't do. Iron Man really does become one of the best duelists to shut down healers because of all of this. And whilst he can just do all of this damage straight from the front line, he's also really good at flanking, and I'll cover more about that later. Before we get into positioning and flanking though, let's look at some ability combos. These combos honestly work better in Omega mode with the Hulk team up, so keep that in mind, but they can still work in normal and armor overdrive mode. The first combo is the Omega rocket combo. Activate your overdrive, aim at the target, fire your missiles, immediately melee to cancel your rocket animation, and then immediately spam your repulsor blast 2 times. This is like an insta-kill on most squishy targets, so definitely learn this. It's the best bursty damage you can get out of him. The next combo is the Squishy Killer. 2 repulsor blasts is not enough to kill a squishy, but if you put in a bit of laser damage first, then it will be enough. The trouble is, the laser activation animation is pretty long, so start with the laser first so the initial animation happens before you deal damage, do about this much damage, and then follow it with 2 repulsor blasts. This combo is best when you're trying to flank opponents and you're shooting them before they notice that you're here. Let's talk about that now for my Iron Man positioning tips. There are actually 2 main ways to play Iron Man when it comes to positioning, so let's break it down. You either play him as a traditional duelist leading the charge of the fight with the rest of your team, or you play as a flanker taking off angles and hidden routes to try and get sneaky angles on the backline. Both players serve to get the same results: eliminate the supports and then the duelists. You don't want to focus tanks too much unless you're trying to farm ultimate charge, because the damage per second on Iron Man is just going to be out-healed when you focus tanks. So let's first look at the traditional positioning for Iron Man before looking at flanking. When playing Iron Man, you never want to just fly freely through the sky. As you play, look at how you can use cover to peek in and out from. Always have cover to hug like this when you're playing Iron Man, and if you don't have cover, use the flying ability to reposition. When playing like this, you have 3 big benefits. Firstly, just like when you're on the ground, you only need to peek when you're dealing damage, so people aren't going to get easy hits on you. And secondly, every time you peek, you can peek from different heights and angles, making it harder for enemies to preempt you. In fact, it's harder to shoot an Iron Man like this than it is a player on the ground who always peeks from the same height. The third benefit is probably the best. Because Iron Man's blasters attacks are area of effect, you don't always even need to see the enemy to deal damage. So not only can you cause constant pain and suffering to the enemy with a barrage of blaster attacks, but the enemies won't even get to see you to shoot back. And because it fires through the air slowly, you can actually peek out for an extremely short time to shoot more accurate blaster shots when you need to, and then just go immediately back into cover. People always say Hela and Hawkeye are counters to Iron Man, but that's because most players don't position with Iron Man correctly. And if you take the positioning tips I've just explained and use them yourself, you'll see why in many cases Iron Man can actually counter Hela and Hawkeye. Even this footage here shows how difficult it is for both the Hawkeye and Hela players to shoot me. They can't. I hardly even peek for them to be able to get an angle on me. If you do ever get caught out in a bad position, you can then use your hypervelocity movement ability to quickly reposition. When doing this, make sure to spam your movement left and right, otherwise you'll be a really easy target. Alright, now let's talk about the flanking playstyle with Iron Man. Most of the time, this is going to work on specific maps where you can actually fly outside of the map and get sneaky angles. The reason why Iron Man is such a good flanker is because when he's not using his hypervelocity, he actually moves through the air silently. So unlike, say, Black Panther or Psylocke, where you're going to be able to hear footsteps as they come up closer to you, you're going to get the jump on enemies more often with Iron Man because they literally cannot hear you. Here's a good flanking route you can use to get behind the enemy's backline to kill the healers. Remember to use the squishy killer combo from earlier for the best results though, and one thing to consider, as soon as you activate the overdrive, you'll make a really loud sound and people will know you're there. So I often find just using the basic repulsor blast and unibeam with the squishy combo is the most effective way to secure kills. And this tip is really important, so let me just say it again, because trust me, I've tried. Flanking and attacking without the overdrive is almost always more successful because the overdrive activation makes a very loud noise that players will hear and they will respond to you before you can even attack as you're stuck in the launch up animation. Here's another flanking route as well. You can sneak into the backline here and you'll be out of enemy view, allowing you to secure kills on the supports. You'll need to fly up on height near your spawn, destroy the wall and go through this secret area at the back, destroy the teammates wall. You can listen for footsteps nearby to make sure that you're not getting too close to them, and then get ready to shoot them in the back. The Iron Man ultimate is one of the most game-changing ultimates in Marvel Rivals, but it's the easiest to get wrong. There are 2 main things to understand about it. It has a slow travel time and long animation time, but it also has a very large blast pattern. What this means is, as soon as you activate it, players will be looking to respond to it, whether it's Doctor Strange shields, or Cloak and Dagger Terror Capes, or just shooting you before it activates, or even just moving out the way. There are so many ways to counter a bad Iron Man ultimate. So how do we do a good Iron Man ultimate? Well, remember how Iron Man doesn't make noise when moving normally through the air? That's your first hint to getting a good ultimate. You want to get into a good position without anybody knowing you're there. This usually means flanking quietly into the backline of the enemy team or setting up above their heads where they may not be looking. The second thing is to be as close to the enemies as possible. The closer you are, the less time they have to respond. And with the ultimate projectile moving so slowly through the air, you're going to need to give them very little time to respond to get successful kills with it. Finally, one trick is that if enemies do notice your ultimate and it ends up being a badly timed ult, you can still get use out of it. Players will generally move out of the way if you're aiming at them, or put up a Doctor Strange shield to block it. But you can flick the ultimate at the very last second after the initial animation plays to change the trajectory of it and catch out any players that may be out of your initial aiming area, like you can see in this clip. The ultimate will always fire from the angle that you're aiming at the very last second of the animation. Oh, and one more underrated ult tip. It actually does damage as it travels through the air. Not really useful in most situations, but you'll get more damage on a team if you fire it as you're level with them instead of from height. So in theory, an ultimate placed like this would be better than an ultimate placed from the sky, but I find it difficult to really make that work most of the time. But, you know, just a little bit of Iron Man trivia for you. Sometimes getting massive amounts of kills with the ultimate isn't the most important thing. Getting results that change the flow of gameplay is what matters. So sometimes just using the ultimate to insta-knock a tank that's stopping objective capture is the best way to use it. It's okay to get one kill with the ultimate if that can change the flow of gameplay. Now that you've learned how to master Iron Man, the best way to get a further understanding of how to play him is breaking down a high-ranked gameplay. I'm going to watch this back and explain my thought process and decision making so you can understand at an even greater level how to play Iron Man better. So as we start, we're on the attacking side. We're going out the main door here. Now, as you'll start to see, I'm always putting pressure on the left side. A good little counter to Spider-Man there. You just stay still and just move your laser beam and it's going to track him pretty well as he flies through the air. We go back to cover there just to heal up. This is way overextended here, honestly, from this enemy team. We're just putting as much pressure as we can to push them back here with my laser. Nothing too important here yet. Really great use of the blaster is that you can get angles like that. We can't even see them, but the blaster is just going to keep traveling through there, hitting players in the back. Now we're getting those direct hits on the enemies there to do extra damage, tracking the Black Panther. And once again, just putting pressure in that tunnel. Can't even see the players, but that AoE damage is just going to put more damage on them to force them back. So taking control of that area with a few direct hits, you can see how powerful it is. And now we've taken control of this area. We're just making sure to peek at the angles if anyone comes through. Put pressure on them. And now we are AFK there for a second. I don't know why. We'll move on. Good tracking there. You can see how, like, you can basically stay still, and because you're in the air, you can rotate 360 degrees or all angles around the enemies to track them, you know, which is really something unique. Like, if they jump behind you, it doesn't matter. And pressure on the Black Panther there. Don't manage to get the kill, but it's okay because we're moving up the objective. Holding this angle here. Look at how, even though I'm flying, I'm still, like, with my team and holding angles fairly, like, closely with my team here. I'm always peeking angles like this. I'm never flying out in the open. Really important thing. Some pressure on that Black Panther. Keeps trying to flank us, so I'm always paying attention to that. Flying up out of the view of the Magneto so we don't get killed there. I see an opportunity for an ult there because I see two of the supports of the backline, but the Doctor Strange blocks the shield. So not the best ult, but saw an angle, try to take my chance. At the moment, pretty standard stuff, nothing to talk about, but I will say how I just want to pause it here. Like, just a quick positioning tip, right? Like how I always say you need to have your body hugging cover, right? I basically these two tanks here are overextended. I think it's one tank actually overextended, but as I'm dealing damage on this tank here, I'm making sure that I'm still hugging this, so all of the enemies on this side don't have vision of me, right? This is just like one thing to think about. Always think about cover. The way that you use cover whilst flying is not necessarily that different to when you're on the ground. But a lot of Iron Man players will just fly out in the open, and that is just going to get you killed. So just something to consider there, you know, as we go on here. Cover, cover, cover. Always think about that. So tanks come in. Gonna have to move back a little bit here because we see aggression from the enemy team. So he's kind of like slowly backstep back. And then still hugging the cover, trying to put pressure on this to try and take control. Like, you can see here why shooting tanks is not necessarily the most powerful thing as Iron Man. There's not much that you can do. Like, your DPS is not going to be good enough to out-damage the heals coming in from the supports. But this is a difficult angle. I can't overextend past this point. Actually, the Moon Knight ult came in. I can't push past that point. With a 25-meter range of my laser, there's not much we can do besides just trying to put enough pressure to push the tanks back a little bit. So we could not, in that situation, do anything other than that. And just put pressure on the tanks to try and farm her out and, like, you know, push those tanks back so we can actually get the objective past the corner, and then our playstyle will change. We called for a Doctor Strange portal there, and Wolverine kind of came in. So I see a good opportunity here. Unfortunately, it kind of missed a little bit. Could have gone a little bit closer. Now we're holding cover again. Like you can see, 24/7, always thinking about holding cover. A good angle, like a good off angle here. Trying to secure the Moonlight kill. Unfortunately, he's just out of range of the laser beam, so we can't get him there. You're going to be using the laser beam as much as you can, but once you're out of range, you can't really make use of it. It is the #1 thing for getting kills. But long range, you're going to be relying on the blasters. And it's mostly going to be used for sort of putting pressure on the supports on the back line so they aren't as effective at healing. Like I said earlier, you can get some really cheeky angles where you're basically invisible to the enemy team, but you're still doing damage on them. So now, any player on the enemy team that's trying to push out, we're putting pressure on them so that they don't have the ability to move out into the play area here, so we can get this objective to the next capture zone. So, you know, any angle that anyone tries to come through, putting pressure on with the blasters, not giving them any room to play with here, just to take control of this area so we can capture it. I've got my ult ready, so we're going to be looking at trying to get a height here, getting an angle to see if we can get any ult plays. Sometimes the ult does not work long range, and it honestly rarely does, but I personally am more happy to be a bit more sort of free with using my ults, because they do come fairly quickly, especially when you got the Hulk team up, because you get a lot of damage. So I'm not too fussed about like being too conservative with my ultimate. I'd rather try and make a play with it than keep it safe, because we can just farm it up pretty quickly. Now, once again, we're just hugging cover, trying to get angles. This is another good way of cover with sort of flying characters. You can sort of go up and down like this, in and out of cover. What the enemies end up seeing is like this, right? You can hardly see them here. So you can also, because you're flying, not just have cover to your side, but have cover up below you that you can peek in and out of. Got caught out there a little bit by the Moon Knight tactical, but support had died, fortunately. At this point, they put out both their support ults. We need to push back a bit and get a bit of an angle again. Once again, the cover we're holding here, as we can see, just to put perspective on it, we've got the cover of this little pillar here. It doesn't look like much, but because of the way angles work, we're standing here. We've got an angle on this whole area, and we can move in and out of cover on just a tiny little pillar here, as you can see here, right? So it's really interesting how like any tiny vertical piece of terrain can be used as a very effective way to get free damage of Iron Man. That's what we're doing here. Putting pressure on the Doctor Strange as he came out with the ult. They're trying to push out and gain map control here, so we're just holding this angle again. Got ult here. This is a good opportunity here because they're all stacked up. So we're going to try and see if we can get a better angle here. Obviously not the best, but we get one kill. There's one example of how you can get kills with the ultimate as it travels. That Namor actually died through the ultimate's traveling and shedding off damage as it traveled through the air, as opposed to the actual explosion radius. At this point, a nice little thing you can do with Iron Man is put pressure on the spawn points, as you'll see here in a second. I put pressure... Actually, I think it was in a different game. Never mind. But what you can do, if they spawn right here, right? If they spawn right here, you can fire right at the ground here, and they'll take damage, even though they're inside the zone. So this can be a really effective way to sort of like stop them getting out of the area. It slows them down a bit, but we didn't do it in that game. I don't want to keep this video going on for too long. It's basically going to be showing the same principles throughout the rest of the match. Thinking about positioning, what the enemies see, and how you can use terrain at all heights and levels to get cheeky angles with Iron Man. Mastering his aim tricks, and overall just thinking always about positioning, and you'll be so much better with Iron Man. Hopefully this video was useful. Let me know, and I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!